Monroe right now. So we just saw one man getting handcuffed, kind of being searched. He has a mask on right here. So they're kind of looking like they're putting his hands behind his back. They're patting him down right now. You can see all this line of police here. They do have their masks on. They have those shields down, and they are drawing this line saying that these protesters are not getting past this. So we're just kind of watching the situation unfolding right now. They're kind of pulling the mask off of this man back here, the one who looks like he has been detained. It looks like there's about 5 or 6 officers all kind of surrounding him. He has his hands behind his back right now. So we're kind of trying to figure out exactly what happened with these pepper balls. I'm getting word that people possibly started throwing things at police. I'm still trying to get that confirmed. That was one report that I did hear. So again, it looks like one man is being detained. This line is drawn again at 2nd Street and Monroe. We made our way through. This is right in front of the Hyatt here. So we made our way through the hotel so we could get a clear look at what's going on. A lot of the protesters here kind of standing right at this line, but they're not seeming to go up to police super hard and aggressive right now. We're going to keep watching that for you. But so far, right now, we just got to this area where we think the pepper balls have been deployed. We heard those really loud bangs. So far, haven't heard any more of that. We're going to keep watching it for you, though. We'll send it back to you guys.
And Kim, as you're sharing this live picture with us, you can't necessarily see a lot of people walking through with masks already, walking right into that spray. Continuing on, what happened for you when you heard about what happened down there? Where were you, and how did you hear that the tone was changing rapidly?
Well, we were actually at our live truck at 5th Street in Washington, kind of a little bit more toward the east side. So now we're at the north side. And we were at our live truck, actually. We started getting word that the tear gas or possibly pepper balls, something was being deployed on the crowd. Some of our sources telling us that some things were kind of transpiring between the protesters and police. So we made our way right over here. And even when we were in that spot at our live truck, we did kind of see some of those confrontations that you guys were talking about, where now that all of these supporters are leaving the convention center, they are kind of coming face to face with some of these protesters. So we've seen some of those lines again being drawn. We've seen some of those people going back and forth, kind of getting in each other's faces, cursing at each other. Haven't seen any physical confrontations so far at this point, but that's where we were over on that side of our live truck when we heard that. We ran over here to get you guys a clearer picture, but kind of calm for the time being. So we're going to keep you guys updated on that.
Kim, thank you.
And
Be safe out there.
Getting word now that they're doing what they call an evacuation of the motorcade route, apparently having to remove people from the route that the president would normally take out of the convention center area. And we don't know exactly what that route is. Usually the Secret Service keeps that under wraps so that people can't try to carry out some sort of attack or disrupt the motorcade in any way. We are now being told that they are evacuating part of that motorcade route. So we don't know whether people have attempted to block the street or whether there has been some sort of disruption that caused police to have to move in to evacuate that route. And we don't know what kind of force may have been used to actually evacuate that route, but that's what we are being told at this point. They are evacuating part of the motorcade route. So unclear whether that means that the president has already left, whether the president is still in the building, whether police are still having to clear the way in some way for that. Generally, what they do in instances like this is they make sure that that motorcade route is absolutely clear before the president leaves the building, because that is the safest place for him. And the motorcade route is often the most vulnerable place security-wise in any particular visit. So at this point, we're getting word that they are having to evacuate the motorcade route, but we're still not clear exactly what that means and what that entails.
And as you take a look at our 3 different camera angles here, you can see the police line there where Kim Tobin has been reporting from, kind of the wider angle up top and then down inside the crowd. And the crowd, it is not a very large, thick crowd anymore. It's likely a result of some of the canisters that came from the police officers there. But obviously, it's something that we are concerned about and really want to keep our eyes on here this evening.
Of course, the worry of all the business owners, too. So many of them shut down earlier in the afternoon to just avoid any possibility of anything like this harming their business and their livelihood as well. So we certainly hope that we don't see any sort of destructive behavior like that, but we'll of course keep you posted. Kim mentioned seeing at least 1 arrest out there, but we haven't heard of any word of injuries at this point, not to officers nor protesters.
Yeah, and some of the protest groups I had seen online had said that their plan, should there be violence this evening, that some of the non-violent protest groups had said what they plan to do was actually, as soon as they see the first bit of violence, to sit down and show that they are non-violent protesters, and that, you know, the people we might see, regardless of what side they're on, are a small number of people and not the masses that were out there earlier in the day.
Yeah, so many of these groups brought their own experts in de-escalating a situation to help. So they had medics out there to help for the heat or to help for any kind of violence. They had observers out there to sort of track what was happening, to be another party to witness things and document things. And then a group out there in the de-escalation process to help when tensions got high from differing opinions.
Melissa Blasius has been covering the rally from inside. She was in that media area watching the speech and watching inside along with the thousands of supporters for Donald Trump inside. She's joining us now on the phone. Melissa, you likely made your way outside at some point, probably with thousands of protesters. Tell us what you were able to see when you got outside.
Sure. Actually, let me give you the scene right now. I'm standing at the corner of Adams and 2nd Street. It's in between Symphony Hall and the Hyatt, where there are police, some of them in their tactical, riot gear, who are standing catty-corner across the street, crisscrossing the streets to keep the people who are filing out from the Donald Trump rally from mixing with protesters on the other side of the street. Some of the protesters are shouting, "Si se puede." At this point, everybody seems to obey by the officers, kind of keeping separate here. But as you can imagine, some tense moments here. There must be 2 or 3 dozen officers in this intersection alone. They have cars blocking the intersection in all directions, and they're just trying to keep the Trump rally supporters away from the protesters at this point. Overhead, there has been a helicopter circling, flying low, as people are coming and going here. But obviously some tense moments here as the Trump rally protesters are coming out, and the Trump rally supporters and the protesters are just feet away from each other.
Yeah. Hey, Melissa, let me ask you, were they trying to be very strategic in terms of how they were funneling the rally goers out of the building there and to try to keep those two groups away from each other?
I don't know exactly. All I can tell you is that the way we went into the building and the way we came out of the building were very different, and the police were very specific about where you could walk and where you could not walk in the convention center on the way out, because we walked all the way from one of the east buildings of the convention center all the way to the west building, and then down the escalators and then out onto 2nd Street. So we ended up about a block from where the actual rally was.
Melissa, stay close right there. We want to update our viewers. A live picture right now of the motorcade making its way safely back to the Omni Hotel in Paradise Valley. This is pictures just from moments ago as they made their way back, just arriving there at Tatum and Lincoln. So we can tell you that the president is now back at the hotel.
And that was a concern earlier on when we were hearing that the motorcade route had been evacuated. People had to be removed apparently from the motorcade route, but it appears that police have been able to accomplish that. And the president now making his way back to the Omni Mauna Lucia, where he is expected to spend the night before returning to Washington tomorrow. So at this point, we know that tear gas has been deployed. We know that there has been at least one arrest, and we assume that that tear gas was deployed to disperse people who were perhaps turning violent or at least attempting to confront either other protesters or the police themselves. And police out there in riot gear forming that line to keep people on one side of it and keep people away from areas where they might damage property or attack other individuals at this point. And police holding that line at this point, using some force, but not overwhelming force in this case. We haven't seen anybody actually fighting or using any kind of weapon or anything like that. We've only seen at this point these pepper balls that are deployed, which make a loud bang and then cause a cloud of gas that obviously irritates people and provides a pretty strong incentive for them to get out of the area.
In fact, ABC 15's Lexi Suter, who was a full block away from some of those pepper balls and the tear gas that went off, has checked in with us saying that her eyes are burning just from a full block away. So that speaks to the strength of the kind of tactics that police are able to use out there.
Yeah, and as we look at that police line, it really does look like they are just sort of holding in place right there. It appears at this moment that they don't appear to be anxious to make any sort of move or start pushing the crowd in any particular direction. It looks a bit more like they're just holding a line and saying no one is going to go past here.
Okay, so at this point we're hearing that there was some sort of confrontation. We were going to get Lexi Suter on the line. We don't have her at this point, but obviously some people obviously feeling the effects of this and feeling the police presence there at this point. But the crowd looks to be dispersing, at least somewhat, from where it was perhaps a couple of hours ago. We have to keep in mind that prior to this speech and throughout the speech, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people outside of the convention center. And then what happens after the speech is so many people come filing out of the convention center. That is when you really start to worry about people mixing it up and confronting each other, because once they get away from those police barricades, it can be kind of a free-for-all.
Absolutely. You know, Andy Hill is joining us on the phone. You would probably remember his name from the Phoenix Police Department, a retired sergeant there who spent decades with the department. Andy, can you help us better understand what sort of mode police would be going into at this point to keep everybody safe from the pictures that you're seeing here?
Well, I think I can give you a little insight. The City of Phoenix and the Phoenix Police Department, as well as the other agencies that they're working with, like DPS and the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, have a lot of experience with large rallies, from the immigration rallies and also with having presidents visit. So what they've done, most of their work was done ahead of time to try and identify all of those people that were going to participate and to communicate with them extensively to find out what their plans are, what they want to do, and to promote peaceful, very constitutional arrangements to make sure that everybody's rights are kept in check without having any violence. So now, as things are happening, what they're doing is responding on a moment-to-moment basis. They're completely ready for that. Chief Williams of the Phoenix Police Department put the entire department on standby, and it was a great move, and it's all the other agencies that are participating are ready for whatever happens. I think we'll see some minimal things happening. The one thing is the unknown is always if there are some anarchist-type groups that are coming in that may be paid or just trying to try violence, and then it'll be up to each individual supervisor with their group to respond to wherever an incident occurs.
Andy, when you see these police out here in riot gear, they do not carry a firearm of any kind when they're in riot gear. Is that correct?
I don't know particularly what they do now. I can tell you that when police officers are on the job, they will carry their firearm. However, they also carry all the non-lethal weapons that they need, or weapons that are just intended to stop somebody and are not lethal. And so there's a mixture of that. But you can't ask a police officer not to carry their gun just in case something extreme happens. And that doesn't mean that they're going to go for it. They're not. They're going to try and do a peaceful first, and just a confrontation verbally, and then give commands if people don't, listen to them. And then eventually, if they need to, they will put hands on those people that refuse and break the law and commit a crime. And those that don't break the crime have nothing to, commit a crime, don't have anything to worry about. It's those that might want to do that will have to face some kind of a consequence.
Andy, what does it feel like as an officer to be out in a situation like that?
Well, having been involved in many of those kinds of things, and I think most police officers in the Valley or any major city at one time or another experience a large group. I kind of go back to when we had the immigration rallies many years ago, and there was a day where we had thousands of people demonstrating, and there was not one arrest made. And you have to give credit to the police departments that plan ahead. And that's exactly what the Valley agencies do. They do everything they can through the use of confrontation squads, community relations bureaus, to make sure that they're in communication with those and having a dialogue to make sure that everybody can go ahead and attend their goal of expressing what their views are.
When we see police forming a line like this, these are pre-established areas where they've said, nobody goes here. They're basically trying to establish some sort of perimeter and a safe zone. Is that correct?
Absolutely. They want to create an area where each side can go ahead and verbally express what they want to get across to the community, to the media, to whoever may be watching. But at the same time, the responsibility of local law enforcement is to go ahead and protect the public and make sure that that laws are not broken. And the goal is to conclude the entire operation, including the demonstration and the visit from a dignitary, and have everybody go their way feeling like they did get their word out, they did make some kind of a statement, and without having arrests or injuries.
Andy Hill, always valuable insight. We appreciate your time with us to keep us updated on this. We want to check in with ABC 15's Kim Tobin, who you saw just moments ago there out on the streets getting an update. Kim?
Hey, you guys. Yeah, again, we're at 2nd Street in Monroe, so we've kind of kept on this side here where we have been talking about that line of police officers. They do have their shields down on their faces. They have their gas masks on, and it's kind of on the other side where you're going to see some of that activity, and they have the loudspeaker on, the police do right now, telling them to back up. So that what we hear is that they're slowly going to try to back up and get all these protesters off to this side, which then they could funnel onto our side of the street on Monroe. But again, they are on the loudspeaker telling them to get back. I did see one guy who was covering his face and his eyes. He had milk all over his face. He said that he got hit by one of those pepper balls, and he said that he wasn't rioting, he wasn't being aggressive. He said he was kind of in the line of fire there with that pepper ball, so his eyes were burning, and he was trying to rub water in his face. We are seeing some of these people who are coming prepared, some of these with masks and everything ready to go all over their faces. Some of these other people already with eye gear on their faces as well, kind of preparing for this. So, okay, there we go again. Okay, you just heard it there, and they're making their way in with the shields, you guys, so we're going to keep on this right now. We just heard that big bang to get everybody to back up. Again, we're talking about this pepper ball spray, that big green, the big green mist kind of came through. We're going to give the protesters some room to get out here. We're going to hang on the side here as we are watching this, but you heard that big bang. I think this is about maybe the 3rd or 4th one I've heard since I've been in this area. So they're pushing them back. Some of these people yelling, "Don't shoot, hands up." The police do have those shields, and they are starting to push now, so we're going to watch that here. And there's another one, another bang, another bit of that green mist kind of going into the air, those pepper balls. And they're backing them up pretty slowly here. Some of these people, I'm not seeing a lot. Oh, there's another one. We just heard the 3rd one as we've been standing here. So they're pushing these protesters back, everybody. So far, we're not seeing any physical confrontations again, but we're keeping our eye on this. We're going to give them some space because we know that they are going to be funneling out. There's another one. That's our 4th one we've heard since we've been here. So they're going through. You can kind of see it through the parking garage. Police are pushing their way through. They are not going to have it anymore. They're going to back them up. They have warned them repeatedly to get out of this area, to disperse, to go home. And we're going to keep watching this. Again, that's our 4th bang that we've heard with the pepper balls. We're going to make our way over to here, kind of give everybody a little bit of a vantage point. There's another one. So here we go. They are spraying it at some people right now, you guys. We're going to try to be safe and get you a nice advantage here to where we can see it. They're pushing us back, so we're slowly making our way, trying to watch our way here. People yelling, "Hands up, don't shoot." And we see all that mist, you guys. We can see a lot of it floating in the air. I can't tell if there's some people within that group, but here they go. They're telling people to get out this way. They're telling the police to kind of make their way down to the parking garage, and you can see that huge line. So keep watching with us here too. We're going to move around to get you a vantage point. People are kind of running through the parking garage at this point as well. We see some of that green mist hanging in the air, you guys, but I think that's about our 5th bang that we've heard, and they're pushing them back. Again, this is at 2nd Street in Monroe, right next to the convention center, right in front of the Hyatt. And it looks, I can't tell if anybody is in that group that they're kind of are detaining at this point. Since we have been out here, we've seen one person detained. But police are making this line, and they have pushed those protesters back. You guys, we're going to send it back into you right now.
Yeah, be safe out there,
Yeah.
Kim. One of the first things that we noticed here in studio just before those bangs went off were a few things that looked like they were being thrown towards the officers, which might have been the cause for those pepper balls to be let off.
And Kim had reported earlier that one of the things that she had heard out there was something that possibly precipitated the initial use of those canisters, of those pepper balls, was when individuals started throwing things at the police. And, that will get a response from the police every time.
And it's unfortunate, but there are inevitably people in some of these crowds that just want to mix it up, and they want to mix it up with police. We've seen it over and over and over again. The law says if a police officer tells you to get back, if a police officer tells you to evacuate the area, you do that. And if you don't do that, then the police have the right to move you out of that area and to use some level of force if necessary. And some of these people clearly were disobeying police commands. Police were telling them to move back, and instead they stood their ground, threw things at the police officers. But you have to give the Phoenix Police Department an incredible amount of credit here, because they're using a minimal amount of force really to accomplish this. They're slowly making their way through a line. They're not attacking people. They're using the least lethal, the least harmful use of force that they can, just to hold the line and to get people to clear out of the area. It's just that some people clearly don't want to do that and clearly are gunning for a confrontation.
Yeah, putting their own safety at risk as well. Obviously, we worry about all our first responders and officers out there as they try to make this crowd
You can see they're very organized, very disciplined in how they're moving. They're moving slowly. They're moving methodically. Steve, as you mentioned, they're not going after any individual protesters. They're just slowly moving their line and pushing the crowd back. And again, we have seen some members in that crowd throwing things back. And this was, again, also to talk about the police a little bit, they had come out in the days leading up to this, as well as the county attorney, and said, we respect your right to protest. You can verbally protest, but you cannot break the laws. And I think that is what we're seeing now, is them holding the line, saying you can have your voice heard, but you can't get violent.
Well, you see that right in this crowd here. The police are clearly moving in their direction. They've clearly formed a line. They clearly want them to back off. And these people are not. They're standing there and either taking pictures or trying to witness the spectacle, or perhaps attempting to mix it up. I mean, if you're somebody in this crowd and people start shooting tear gas and you see a confrontation happening, your instinct is going to be to get out of there and not to hang out. But a lot of these people have clearly made it clear they want to hang out and possibly mix it up. And we don't know if they're from Arizona. We don't know if they're from other places. We don't know how many of them plan to do this or are looking for some sort of confrontation. But what we do know for sure is that when police are telling them to leave, they are not leaving. Some of them clearly are people trying to photograph it. There are clearly journalists in there who are trying to see what's happening. But at the end of the day, the police tell you to do something and you got to do it.
And I would imagine there are undercover officers in that crowd as well. So kind of watching from the other perspective to see exactly what's going on, seeing if they can get any additional information and relaying that back behind those police lines. We have Lexi Suter. She's on the phone with us. Lexi, where are you now and what are you seeing?
I'm standing at Van Buren and 2nd Street, and right now there is just a shield of police officers blocking the entrance. If you're going down 2nd Street back towards the convention center, that's where a lot of the tear gas has been deployed. I myself felt it. I mean, it was just overcoming. You really can't even see anything. People were covering their eyes, wiping their eyes, pouring milk in their eyes, and right now it feels like people are just getting more frustrated because the shield of police is pushing people further out. So right now we are on the perimeter. I am also up on Facebook Live to try to give you guys the best visual as possible there as well. So we are going to stay right here and keep monitoring this situation. Back to you guys.
It should be noted that the police are standing in front of a couple of large trucks there, and it appears that those trucks are put in place to just try to provide an extra blockade to a particular street. Police, when they plan all of these things, they plan areas where people can go and protest, but you've got to stay in a certain area, and you've got to stay behind barricades. And we can protect your First Amendment right to protest, but that doesn't mean that you can just go anywhere you want, especially in a security situation involving the President of the United States.
Yeah, and some of those makeshift barricades, if you will, so then they could move a truck in and keep people safe from things like we saw in Charlottesville, so that a driver couldn't get through that particular area. We want to check in with ABC 15's Kim Tobin once again to find out what's happening there. Kim?
Hey, you guys, again, we're at 2nd Street in Monroe, and we're giving you a look here. Looks to be a little bit of a scuffle going on here between police and some protesters. We're keeping our eye here right towards the wall of the Hyatt, 2nd Street in Monroe. Police started moving forward. They kind of started pushing us back a bit. So they're warning people, this is it. For 2nd Street in Monroe, they did it on the other side. They're ready to push us back here. So they're pushing some people back. They're kind of trying to get a look at what's going on, but you kind of see the line moving forward. Some of these protesters yelling at police. That's kind of what that confrontation led to right there. So we're going to keep an eye on that. Doesn't look like anybody was detained there, but you can see they are making their way west on Monroe. They're starting to push everyone back, and we're going to watch and see how these protesters, if they listen, if they comply to the orders here. But we'll give you a little look behind back here. This is the crowd of protesters back here who are kind of waiting. We're going to see if they listen to police commands to push them back here and make their way west on Monroe, because police are not messing around. You just saw it, what they did on the other side. They have about 5 pepper balls, those bangs going off, some of that tear gas deployed.
Yeah,
we're going to hope that's not the situation here.
We are looking at that in a picture on the other side of the screen right there. And as we take that full for our viewers, you're seeing some of the protesters throw those back into police, and unbelievably so, part of the street is open, so cars are making their way through. Couldn't imagine trying to get through some of that right now.
Yeah. When you watch this,
we'll
it
watching
just
that too,
clearly
guys,
seems
'cause
like
it
some of
looks-
these folks are looking to mix it up with police, and that's a shame.
Yeah.
It really is, because there are so many people, so many local groups especially, who come down here and they want to protest, they want to make a serious point, they want their voices heard, and it only takes a handful of people to really ruin things and to give protesters a terrible name here. We're seeing a handful of people in the streets here right now doing this, when there were hundreds or thousands of people down there earlier who told us and were absolutely resolved to be peaceful about this, and instead you've got a handful of people that just for some reason want to
and we just heard a loud
get involved
bang
in
and a
confrontation
flash
with police.
there.
Yeah.
As people continue to disperse there a little bit, and again, as you mentioned earlier, the car's still moving through that area as well. Kim, if we still have you, do you have any sense of
guys, yeah, you got me.
What the strategy is from the police? Are they just trying to push everybody out, away from the convention center area, or are they moving them a particular direction?
Yeah. They are moving them west on Monroe. So again, we're at 2nd Street in Monroe. So they are getting pushed back away from the convention center at this point. So everyone's kind of getting slowly pushed back here. That line has been drawn. So again, heading westbound on Monroe, getting us kind of out of the convention center area, if you will.
Kim, do you know if everyone is out of the convention center at this point?
I haven't been over to that side. Do we know if everybody's out of the convention center? We're trying to keep our eye on that. We've seen so many Trump supporters coming out. It looked like most folks had gotten out, but we can't say for sure if like 100% of everyone is out of there at this point.
Yeah,
we're trying to move and walk here with the protesters as they are listening to those They are listening to those demands by the police officers to get back. You guys.
Yeah, the very early pictures that we were taking, the live pictures
there's another
out
bang,
there.
you guys. Another bang.
Wow.
And that police line seems to be getting deeper and deeper now, where we saw kind of a single file line across the street. It looks like the officers are now at least 3 deep, holding their shields there and trying to, again, push those protesters back.
Andy Hill joining us again, former Phoenix police officer. And Andy, is there a next step to doing this? Police officers are forming a line. They're trying to release some of these tear gas canisters. They're just trying to get people to disperse. Is there a next step in doing this, or do police just wait it out and hope these people finally give it up and move on?
Well, there certainly is a next step, Steve and Katie. What they're doing is they are responders, so they are responding to the actions of those that they are working with or confronting with or have demonstrated. So what they are going to do is just continue to respond to what the demonstrators are doing. If they're not doing what the police ask them to do lawfully, they could all be breaking the law, and therefore they may be subject to arrest, but they're also subject to being pushed back and using whatever means the police need to do that, which is always going to begin with less lethal force, or non-lethal force. Is going to be a force that's the minimum amount required or necessary to make people comply. Hopefully there's some word going out on social media also with instructions for people in the area. That's something that we haven't had until, recent years. So hopefully there's some instructions being given to people as to what they need to do. And hopefully all those citizens out there that are acting or protesting or leaving the speech are getting instructions and moving accordingly according to the directions of law enforcement in the area.
Yeah, it says, in fact, I'm just checking Phoenix Police Twitter account right now, and the most recent tweet from 26 minutes ago says, officers are addressing criminal behavior near 2nd Street and Monroe. Please follow the directions to move from that area. It's interesting to hear the different tactics that are being used like that to move people back, Andy.
Well, we didn't have this tactic, 10, 15 years ago. So within the last 6, 7 years, it's become a very critical help to law enforcement and to anybody else who wishes to communicate clearly and completely. So they're going to continue to use it as a tool to try and help keep the peace and to give those people that want to avoid confrontation and problems to know where and how to get out of the area.
Yeah,
and that's what people need to do now.
I mean, even on apps like Nextdoor, we saw Chief Williams early on days ago saying, here's the plan, here's how much I can say, here's what needs to be kept quiet, but here's how we're taking steps to keep all of you safe. In addition to social media and things like that, you also have to stay ahead of any dangers out there. And I noticed they were saying no drones in the area as well.
Absolutely. You have to try to make the area as safe as possible with as many things that won't affect people. There's nothing that's going to hurt anybody by not being able to fly a drone in the area. The drone is inanimate. It's not, it's not going to have feelings or rights or anything else. So anything that could potentially be a problem or attract somebody to try to do something negative, like to shoot down a drone or to use the drone to do something, those things are unnecessary in an arena which is supposed to be a venue for people to express their opinions. And those things that don't fit into that are not necessary and don't need to be there.
Yeah, I was reading about the concern of a weaponized drone or having some tactic like that people could do something from far away and not even be taking part in the protest, or people downtown, but putting them in danger from a distant location.
Yeah.
And we're getting a little bit more word here just through social media that there are numerous reports now. The Phoenix police are saying that people were throwing rocks and bottles at police officers. That is why they deployed this tear gas technique. And obviously, Andy, when you see these pictures and you see some of these people that are just standing there in the street when clearly they've been told to leave, they've been told to back off, can you really call them demonstrators anymore? Or are they there to agitate the situation?
Well, my experience, and I think if you ask anybody that's been around long enough in law enforcement, they are there to create problems. And that's their vision, either personally or what they've been paid to do and come and do. That's their goal. That's what they want to do. They want to create agitation. They want to get on, they want to get on television. They want to get their message out. They want to create discord, disharmony. They want to make people insecure. And that's what their view is. So again, but still for law enforcement, you have to respond in a lawful way with a minimal amount of force to go ahead and enforce the law. And they are not going to step things up unless those who are trying to cause that to happen step it up themselves. So, you do the best that you can with it, but unfortunately, sometimes these things happen. And hopefully the public at large sees, because you're showing it, the truth about what's happening. It's, there's nothing that's going to help any more than for people to see those people who are agitators agitating others and attacking police officers. So, they're going to respond accordingly.
Yeah. Andy, is it easier or harder for the police when a rally like this that is likely to bring protesters along with it as much as it is supporters is announced well ahead of time? And, we've heard reports of people coming in from out of state. And as we take a look at another scuffle breaking out on the streets here as we talk to you, is it easier for police because they can plan with more time, or is it tougher because you don't know exactly what you're dealing with?
Okay. Hey,
let's go over to Kim Tobin right now. And Kim, what are you seeing?
Hold your answer, Andy.
Hey,
Sure.
stand by.
Kim, what just happened out there?
Hey, Hey guys, we just had a big, huge burst of people going through because we had some pepper balls kind of deployed right in the middle of it here at First Street in Monroe, so everyone just went running. There is a guy here with a "Don't Tread on Me" flag. He has been very vocal. He has his microphone. He's been shouting at a lot of people. Some people just ripped up his flag. So everyone's kind of being pushed off the street at this point because now we're in traffic. We've been moved a whole block. We were at 2nd Street in Monroe. Now we're at 1st Street in Monroe. And people are clearly, visibly going out right into the street, even though they have been told by police numerous times, do not get in the intersection, do not block the street. But here's these people here clearly holding up their signs. But everyone kind of bursts. You hear that bang? And those balls go flying with those pepper balls, and everyone keeps going pretty quick, but then they kind of migrate back to the street. So we're watching these here. People are literally taking photos in the middle of the intersection here, even though the light's green, and even though police have told them multiple times to clear the streets. So again, we've been moved about a whole block away from the convention center. We tried to go running there as soon as those pepper balls were released and people were going to get that into their eyes, but now here they go back in again as they are making their way toward the middle of the street and being told to stand out.
Yeah, Kim, be safe out there.
Hey guys, I'll send it back to you.
On one of the other shots, we were seeing a guy in pretty bad shape. Hopefully, they're going to get a medic over to that person as quick as possible.
So we still have Andy on the phone. Andy, I want to revisit what we were just talking about before we checked in with Kim there for just a moment about, when a rally like this is announced several days ahead of time, is it easier or is it tougher for police to plan for something like this?
Well, the more advanced lead you have, the better it is for all of law enforcement, because then they can work together. All the major agencies and the agencies in the valley then can communicate. There's time for the units that in each police department that's involved to communicate with all the groups involved and establish relationships and to try and minimize any kind of problem that would occur. So having lead time is very positive. The downside, of course, is if those entities that want to cause trouble want to try and bring people in from the outside, it gives them more time possibly too. But it's good for the more time you have, the more communication you have, the better things are. And I think we'll find out that this was a select group tonight that was trying to do that, and we're going to see the police response. And we also have to remember too that these police officers are just people. They are, they're doing a job, and nobody wants bad things to happen, and no one wants to have to hurt somebody. But they are supposed to, make the peace be there. And those people that come and want to have an honest, open discussion should be able to do so freely without being overcome by those who wish to do violence.
Yeah, and they have families at home as well that they want to get home to safely tonight, too.
Andy, in your experience, are people who do this sort of thing, are they locals, or are they people that gravitate toward these types of situations from other places?
Well, I think if you talk to any police officer that's been around in the valley for a long time, especially those that have dealt with these kinds of things, these people are typically from out of town. And we've had groups like, anarchists and others that do that specifically. And it's rare where you have, especially in the city of Phoenix, where there's such good community police contact and relationships, where they spend so much time working on things, it's rare to have violence. And it's almost always from out of town, or those who would wish to come and do some harm or stir something up.
Yeah, we've seen some of the protesters that certainly look like they came ready for trouble. Let's put it that way, with masks and covering their faces, and they seem to be prepared for the pepper pellets or tear gas or whatever the police are going to be using here.
Yeah, unfortunately, their view of society is that they want to tear it down. They want to tear down any authority. They don't really understand and accept that, the value of law enforcement. Everybody that does that kind of thing doesn't really think ahead to the time when, God forbid, they need to call 911 and have first responders show up. So they are professionals in the sense that they make themselves available to go ahead and do these kinds of things. And it's a sad commentary because there are so many valid points of view that people need to express, and this just keeps that from happening, and it takes the focus away from the real issues.
Yeah, and our thoughts are with all of those police officers out there, obviously putting themselves on the line and putting themselves in harm's way just to try to clear out these crowds as well. And we certainly hope they are all remaining safe tonight and don't come to any harm. We don't want anybody to come to any harm, but it's a shame that people are deliberately trying to stir this kind of thing up and possibly injure an officer or injure an innocent bystander even.
We want to update you as well. We heard from Nick Saletti inside the convention center, and he's getting us an answer on what happened to anybody else who was left inside of the convention center. They've all now been asked to leave. So for a bit, when this just started, the doors were closed, and it looked like some people were either being told to stay inside or were choosing to stay inside with those doors closed. But Nick said that they are clearing out the convention center already. I understand Lexi Suter is joining us back on the phone with what she's seeing out there. Lexi?
Hi, Katie. We're at 3rd Street and Van Buren now. That we are pushed another block east. The police officers continue to kind of make that shield in an effort to just kind of disperse the crowd and get people away. More tear gas also deployed, but people are definitely getting the hint because, it does burn your eyes. So they are moving further out. It does feel like it's getting a little bit calmer on this side of it. Again, we're about 2 blocks north of the convention center, and police are doing a great job of trying to just kind of keep the intersection blocked off and keep people away. So we are going to stay right here and monitor from this angle for now. Send it back to you.
Yeah. Andy, since we still have you on the line, I want to go back to you. Will police, in preparing for something like this, call their counterparts in other cities, and obviously Charlottesville is the one that comes to mind right away, and say, what do you guys feel you did right? What do you feel you did wrong? What can we learn from you?
Specifically, Katie, I don't know exactly who they contacted, but generally speaking, during the course of any year, there was a lot of connection between leaders of law enforcement agencies. Through IACP, which is the International Association of Chiefs of Police, or meetings. They meet regularly, and they actually debrief each other on major incidents. And that goes on continually. So I am sure, although I don't know specifically, that there's been contact between agencies and probably those that have already had those kinds of things. And of course, the federal partners that work with the local police departments also have information from each one of those incidents, and they do collaborate. And that's a key word, because the collaboration work includes not just all the law enforcement people, but it also includes those entities that want to demonstrate peacefully or have a point of view, and they all end up working together. And the only real distraction, which is really shouldn't be the distraction, but ends up being the distraction, is the one that turns to some kind of violence or creates a police action. But the vast majority would have been peaceful, would have been everybody expressing their opinion, and most of the people will have gone home. So we don't want to give too much attention to the few, but we understand why it's newsworthy.
Hey, Auntie, I just want to interrupt for one moment. We were looking at a split screen there before, and what it looked like was happening on the left side of the screen was actually something very hopeful that I want to touch on. It was a heated conversation that we were watching, and we weren't privy to the language, and that might be a good thing, considering it's not on a delay at this hour. But what we were watching is two parties sort of have a disagreement, and it ended in a handshake. It ended in the two sides shaking hands and agreeing to go separate ways. One guy asking the other guy to take a selfie. He declined, of the two of them. But it seemed to be a turnaround in a conversation out there. And if we could have more of those and see that more often, we could be at a turning point.
I hope you take that experience in that video. I hope it's available and we can use it as a poster child kind of thing to show people what they could do and turn it into some kind of a public service announcement or for others to use, because that's exactly what we would like to see happen.
Yeah, it was about a 3-minute conversation that was happening there on the left of your screen. So, and we saw things like that earlier, and not to skip over some of those. Kim was highlighting some of those situations earlier today when we were checking in. Two different sides having vastly different opinions, but talking for a bit and coming to a place of better understanding. If they still hold their ground and still stay of opposite opinions, that's one thing, but being able to have a civil conversation and at the end on the streets of Phoenix when things are going on like this, be able to shake hands and walk away from the conversation peacefully.
Yeah, unfortunately, what we're seeing on social media, too, is already there's a blame game happening here.
Always.
And some people are saying, no, it wasn't the Trump people, it was the anti-Trump people, and they're the ones who are causing all of this. And realistically, we've heard it from Andy Hill himself. Some of these folks, they're not necessarily pro-Trump, anti-Trump as much as they are just
pro-violence.
And pro-violence
pro getting in there.
And pro, anti-police and that sort of thing. A lot of these local groups that you hear about actually talk with the police and work with the police, and they tell them what they're going to be doing and where they're going to be going, and they make it clear that they're not intending to cause any harm or create any kind of violent confrontation. But there's always a handful of people that they just want to mess things up.
Yeah,
And it's unfortunate because, you've seen it not only here, but you see it in almost every major gathering. I remember covering a political convention 17 years ago, and it was the same sort of thing. There were people peacefully protesting, and then there was a handful of people nearly every night just looking to mix it up with police.
Yeah. Let's check in with Kim Tobin once again. She's been our eyes and ears on the ground. Kim, what's the update from there?
Hey, you guys, again, First Street in Monroe is where we are, and we have seen a couple people kind of make their way into the street but then get back out, as we've been saying, in that police line drawn there. And this is where traffic is. You can see cars really easily making their way in and out. I really wouldn't want to be stuck in traffic if I was here. I wouldn't want to be kind of surrounded by these people as they're making their way into the street and out. But right now, not too bad. We have seen some of those people kind of have a bit of confrontations, some Trump supporters and some protesters get in each other's faces a little bit and then kind of go their separate ways. And something that I've seen out here too, we have been talking about some of the hostility and some of the protests that were going on, but we did see I saw some protesters trying to talk down some other protesters, saying, hey, take it easy. We don't want to get in trouble. We don't want anyone to get in trouble. So we're walking right now with the police officers. Again, we're going west on Monroe, and some of these people are holding up the signs right in front of police officers, walking side by side with them. So far, everything's staying calm here, but as we've been reporting to you guys, we did have several of those big bangs and some of that pepper spray deployed. So walking right now, headed westbound down Monroe, heading towards Central, and they're kind of pushing this back, but the corners are filled still with a lot of people on all sides of the street there at First and Monroe. So this is kind of a group of police officers asking everybody to stay out of the road, asking them to stay out of the traffic, because this is where all the traffic is actually making their way through. But again, we haven't seen any physical confrontations per se. You do see that man with the yellow flag there. He did have one flag ripped, but not really. Again, we didn't see any punches thrown. We haven't seen anything like that. And now we're going into Central and Monroe, where they're yelling at people to get out of the street. Sorry for that language. Again, this is a live broadcast, and there's a lot of choice words being thrown back and forth at each other. So we are apologizing for any of those curse words that you might hear, you guys. But here we go. Some people kind of getting into the middle of the street. Police are yelling at everyone to get out because they're blocking traffic at this point. Traffic is supposed to be flowing pretty freely here. And some of these people running, some of these people getting right in the face of police officers. So we're watching here with you, but they're yelling in their faces now, telling them to get out of the street. They're not allowed to be here. Central and Monroe, again, is where we are, right in front of the San Carlos Hotel, if you're familiar with that area here in downtown Phoenix, right next to Arizona State University down here. So we do see some people kind of having a confrontation with police. It looks like there's some vehicles in the middle of the road here trying to watch what's going on. I do not see anybody detained at this point. I see a woman getting out of the car, kind of running over there to talk with officers. But again, not seeing any violence at this point, just lots of running. So here's some of these confrontations that we've been talking about. Danny, if you want to come over here, my photojournalist who's kind of watching. These are some of these kind of confrontations. We want to stay a little bit back because we don't want to get any of those curse words that might be flying right now. But a lot of these pro-Trump supporters who are out here leaving the convention center, again, are kind of being met with these protesters. And there's some of these confrontations going on here. They're talking about Russia right now and holding each other's signs in each other's faces. So this is something that's been pretty common as we have been leaving here and as the convention center has been unloading with a lot of people. Again, apologize for that strong language out here that's being thrown around by these protesters and these Trump supporters here. You guys, we're going to send it back to you.
Kim, thank you. We want to check in. We'll keep this picture up, but we want to check in with Melissa Blasius on the phone. Melissa, where are you now?
I'm still at 2nd Street and Adams, where there are still a couple of dozen officers and protesters. They've had to break up several skirmishes between groups of protesters and folks on the street at this point, but they are allowing a small group to stay, despite we've heard repeated calls on a loudspeaker, whether that's over where Lexi is or here, telling people to leave the area. So we still have people on the streets here. Police have blocked off both the intersection of 2nd Street and Adams, and then up farther 2nd Street and Monroe, where the skirmishes were happening over at the parking garage over there. And so they're just trying to clear out this area as well as they can at this point. We have heard in the last 10 or 15 minutes more of those pops believed to be the pepper spray or the pepper balls that are going off, and we've seen clouds of smoke about a block away from where we're staying. So obviously, if you are in the area, you want to, follow the police directions, and if they ask you to leave, leave, because they are trying to get as many people out of this area as possible at this point.
Yeah, and in this day and age, of course, everyone has a phone, and so all the phones are out. We see those recordings happening right now as well.
We want to mention you're seeing a programming alert right there at the bottom of your screen. There's several of you calling in or writing in and asking about was supposed to be on, which was Bachelor in Paradise. It will be airing in its entirety at 12:05 a.m. So in a couple of hours, you can set your DVR and catch up with Bachelor in Paradise tomorrow. Once again, in its entirety. We started to broadcast it, and then that's when things and the tone downtown changed drastically, and we needed to cut back in for people's safety.
And some of these people just still insisting on being there and not leaving. And certainly they can be on the sidewalk. Certainly they can be in a number of areas. The one thing that they cannot do is block the streets or break the law. And it appears that some people are insisting on doing that. Yeah, I'm struck by the calm of a lot of these officers, sort of smiling and joking around a little bit with each other. Some of these confrontations have gotten pretty dicey, but we haven't seen any serious violence, if you will. We haven't seen any punches thrown. We haven't seen anybody using any sort of baton or anything like that to try to cause serious harm to people. The police are being as restrained as they can be in terms of forming a line, keeping people out of certain areas, and using tear gas to try to disperse people, but not necessarily any sort of violent confrontation, even though they're being egged on here. Clearly, they're being challenged by these people in the street, and it's disturbing to watch.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning. I mean, if you think about the tens of thousands of people that were in that downtown area, both inside the rally and protesting outside of the rally, and you're left with essentially a very, very small group of agitators now who are either want to record provocations with the police or create problems now themselves.
I haven't heard from any of our crews in the field about what percentage of businesses actually ended up shutting down today. We saw several places that had signs that said, we're going to close early for the afternoon. We'll be back open tomorrow for both the safety of their employees and people coming into the business. And some schools as well that were saying, we're going to get students out of here so that everybody can remain safe.
And a credit to some protest groups
we're
as
seeing
well.
some people sprayed right there as they tried to make their way back into the streets after police were saying that they needed to stay out of the streets. We saw that police SUV arrived moments ago. Let's check in with Kim Tobin. Kim, what did you just see?
Okay.
Kim, are you safe where you are?
Stand by.
Kim?
Hey, you guys. Hey. We just went running here. A little bit of that tear gas pepper spray was deployed, so we're making our way down here. Central and Monroe is where we are. You can hear that bam, and we are walking down this way. We're going through here, you guys. Give us a second. 1 second.
Yeah, no, take as much time as you need. Your safety is obviously our top priority, as well as we try to bring people what's happening out there. But we saw a group of about 5 or 6 people make their way into the street. We'd seen them out there protesting, the woman in the cream shirt holding a peace sign for a while, but then moving out with that group into the street.
Hey,
5 or 6 of them, and then being sprayed. We can hear you, Kim.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are you okay?
Now, if we're okay. Hey. Sorry about that. We had some. So basically, we did see a couple of those protesters get into it with some of the Trump supporters. And I did see one woman who was pushing a man. They kind of went into it right into the street. And that's when police deployed that pepper spray. So give us a second here because we are all kind of coughing and trying to get our voices back. But police are racing down this way. Everyone kind of dispersed at that point and ran. So now we are at Van Buren and Central. A lot of people coughing, a lot of people trying to rub their eyes out from all of that tear gas and pepper spray that might have been flying there, and you heard those bangs. So that was really right when that woman started pushing that man. They went into the street and then they deployed that super quick, and it cleared everyone out, you guys.
Yeah, most reporters have at one point in their career been in a situation like that where you've seen something deployed and been caught in that. It's not fun. So take as much time as you need to be able to talk
your
with
breath
us
there
again.
and-
Yeah, I've
yeah.
been there. I mean, I remember it happening on Mill Avenue at one point, just overwhelming as you're still trying to be out there and bring everybody what's happening.
But, you know, I'll note the two officers we just saw on the side of the shot there. They're standing in the corner. They're not standing in a very aggressive posture. I mean, they're stationed there. They're keeping an eye on what's happening. But, you know, the shields over their eyes are up right now. Some other officers are walking around not having the shields on at all over their faces or the masks over their faces anymore. Just kind of keeping an eye on what everyone is doing out there. And a lot of people, to be fair, are sort of observing what may or may not be happening with others.
Let's get to Nick Saletti now. Nick, you were inside the convention center as this rally was wrapping up. Earlier we heard that they had, at least for a time, closed the doors, told people not to go outside because of what was happening outside. Have they cleared the convention center at this point?
Steve, it's our understanding that, yes, they have cleared the convention center right now. They were telling us earlier that we had a hard out time of 9 o'clock. That included members of the media, but also folks there that were trying to attend President Trump's rally. And we don't have any firm numbers yet on how many people went, but quite easily thousands and thousands of people. So you can just imagine how difficult of an operation it was to try to get all those folks outside. But from my understanding, everybody has cleared that building. But real quick, I just want to mention to you guys, I'm at Washington and 3rd Street, so just right at the intersection, right on the edge of the convention center, where just about 5 minutes ago they had to forcibly move. Police had to forcibly move some protesters back and told them they had to disperse. It was a group of about 150 people. They were given about a 5-minute warning and then told that they had to disperse, and then police went up to where they were and forcibly had to move them back, telling them that they had no other choice. It looks like one person here was arrested. We could hear one person kind of screaming and wailing. And from my vantage point right now, it looks like she's being placed in the back of a police car. So I do believe she is under arrest. So far, I haven't heard of any other reports of people being arrested. I'm not at the area where the pepper spray was deployed either. Again, I'm at Washington and 3rd Street, right on the edge of the convention center. But just 5 minutes ago, Phoenix police forcibly having to move away these protesters and telling them to disperse. So right now this area has calmed down, but I'm still seeing a number of police officers. I'm trying to count real quick. Looks like at least 3 dozen police officers, some of them still in that riot here because, of course, we know that threat is still out there. These officers trying to keep us safe, but they also need to keep themselves safe.
Yeah, it's just a situation where everybody doesn't seem to want to leave, and they seem to want to mix it up with folks, and it's a darn shame. And we've said it over and over again. But you watch these folks, and they're looking for something else to happen. And at this point, show's over, guys. Go home.
Yeah. Andy, since we still have you on the line, let me ask you this: who makes the call out there?
Yeah, Andy's not on the line.
Oh, we lost Andy on the line. Okay. All right, I was going to ask him, if he could share with us who makes the immediate call right there on the police line of when they're going to make that decision to move forward.
Yeah, he spoke to that a little bit earlier, saying that it's a case-by-case basis, it's a moment-by-moment basis, and it really kind of depends on what people do when we're told to disperse, what people do when they form these lines, whether they try to confront police and that sort of thing. But you see a lot of heavy equipment out here. You see a lot of officers. You got to be struck by the cost to the city in handling something like this. It's already an enormous cost just working to provide security for any presidential visit whatsoever. It's got to be a much higher cost when you talk about all of the overtime and all of the officers and all of the resources that have to be deployed just to disperse a crowd that clearly wants to agitate and get involved with police in some way. The overtime costs, I mean, it's got to be a tremendous amount. We're going to be asking the city of Phoenix a little bit later at some point if they can really come up with a number on something like this, because it's not just the riot control and the crowd control, but it's the motorcades, it's the blocking off of streets, it's all of the preparation, putting up all of these different barricades and all of the things that they have to do to provide security for the president himself and all of the dignitaries that are there as well. And it's a tremendous cost to the city of Phoenix. And
it sure is. And in fact, Councilman Michael Nowakowski joining us on the phone right now. Your thoughts when you're seeing all of this?
You know, at first it turned out to be a great day. I mean, people were out there expressing their point of view on both sides, and it was very peaceful until the very end when some people in the crowd started to throw rocks and bottles at police officers, and our police officers responded back with pepper balls and OC spray to attempt to dispirit the crowd and make sure that everybody was safe.
What do you think of the people that are doing this, Michael?
You know, it's really sad. A lot of times it's individuals that are outside of our community. Most of the individuals that we've talked to, we met prior to the rallies, agreed to do it in a peaceful way. I believe it must have been some individuals that came out of state that created chaos.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the city and the police department, they're in contact with groups like Puente, and they talk about what's going to happen and where they're going to protest and where the groups are going to be moving, how many people are going to be gathered, that sort of thing. There's a cooperative effort with the city and police, is there not?
Oh, absolutely. They sit down, they meet with these individuals, and they plan out the areas that they like to protest at and how many people are going to be showing up. So there's great cooperation. Police officers escort them, close off streets for them to march and protest also.
At the end of the day, you know, we had Phoenix Mayor Greg Stanton publish an op-ed piece in the Washington Post, and he said he urged President Trump not to come here, fearing something like this would happen. Does the mayor turn out to be right here?
You know, I think the mayor is right. You know, I really believe that the president should have went to basically the individuals that have passed away and say sorry for losing the lives of their loved ones and heal the wounds in Charlottesville instead of coming to Phoenix first.
Where were you all day today? Were you watching this on television, and then where were you when the tone started to change down there?
Well, matter of fact, I was walking around the convention, outside the convention center, just watching how peaceful everything was. You had individuals that disagreed, but they agreed to have a conversation and debate. And I believe one of the things that I learned was that we can come together, we can actually have a conversation, and we can find some common ground. But it's a handful of individuals that really mess up the opportunity to make that change, right?
Councilman, you probably caught some, or if not all, of the president's speech tonight. I was looking through my notes, noting anything that might be a significant policy announcement or a significant newsworthy thing, if you will. I mean, he hinted at possibly pardoning Sheriff Arpaio. He went on for about 39 minutes talking about the media and the statements that he made after Charlottesville. Was this worth it?
You know what's really sad is that he came out here and he didn't announce a pardon for Sheriff Joe Arpaio, but he said in the future, right? So it's really sad is that individuals from Maricopa County went out, voted into a new sheriff because of all the bad practices that were going on there. And it was kind of a slap in our faces to have a pardon go out to Sheriff Joe Arpaio. I believe that's wrong. I believe that what Sheriff Joe Arpaio has done to the Hispanic community in Maricopa is wrong, in that he needs to actually get his hand slapped for that.
I guess what I'm getting at is the president has held a number of these campaign rallies all across the country, and he seems to enjoy them, and his supporters seem to enjoy them. But is it more show than substance?
Oh, I believe it's all show and very little substance. He loves the media, and he just basically spent 3/4 of his conversation talking about the media and CNN. It was really, really sad, instead of talking about bringing the community together, bringing our country together, and finding that common ground for everyone.
Yeah, that common ground, and then we have deep concern for our crews out in the field as well, when we're hearing some of the things being said there. I'm hearing from people on Twitter and social media who are saying this was a waste of money and time. When do we specifically know? When does the bill come in? When do we know the grand total?
Well, you know, that probably added up in about 2 or 3 days, and we'll give you that grand total. But once again, I was a part of the SB 1070 marches. All that adds up to also a bill to there too. So we live in this great country of the United States of America. We have this freedom of speech, and we as a city and government need to protect that in every way possible. So sometimes it hurts our purses big time. So, you know, once again, the SB 1070 marches cost us rally of our president cost us. So it costs all these Black Lives Matters marches, all the marches that are out there. It costs money. So
it was a week ago that the president said there was fault on both sides, something that was highly controversial when he was referring to Charlottesville. Is there fault on both sides tonight?
First of all, we got to really examine who started throwing these bottles and rocks at police officers. If it was just a couple knuckleheads, it's really sad that a great evening, a great conversation from both sides ended up by a couple knuckleheads throwing some rocks and bottles at police officers. And the police officers had to respond with zero tolerance.
And some of these protesters would undoubtedly say they're against President Trump and his policies. Is it fair to say that some of these anti-Trump protesters were the agitators in this case?
I couldn't tell you until we look at the video and we figure out who actually threw the rocks and who created the chaos.
What grade would you give the police officers that are out there tonight?
I would give them an A+. I mean, these police officers have controlled the crowd. They were in control of the on both sides, and it was a peaceful event until individuals started throwing rocks and bottles at our police officers, and they had to respond back to that. And I think they created it could have been a really bad situation, and I think they used enough force to actually not to create a bad situation.
We thank you for taking the time to join us on the phone tonight and provide your insight, Councilman. I'm sure we'll be hearing more from you throughout the coming days. For those of you who are just joining us, our 10 o'clock news would normally be beginning in just a matter of minutes, but the speech had wrapped up at about 8:30 tonight, almost a 90-minute speech. And it wasn't but 10 minutes later that we started to see more of the scuffles on the streets, and then some of the tear gas and the pepper balls being deployed out there to try to get these crowds under control just minutes after the convention center doors opened up.
You have to wonder what this says about our country and the state of our country right now. This president started his speech by talking about unifying the country and how every life and every community and every job matters, and then went on a lengthy speech about the media and how he's been misinterpreted and that sort of thing. If the president's intention is to unify the country, we have to wonder how much we're seeing here, how much the president really has control over anything like that. And certainly you have these people who are agitating with police, you have these people who are protesting. They may feel that they have a cause here, but you have to wonder if their cause is really well served in doing this kind of thing. It doesn't look good for them. There's no question about it, and there's no way to slice it to say that it does. And when you see this sort of thing, it's disappointing and disturbing, really, to see that people are so angry that they will turn to violence, especially against members of our law enforcement community who so often find themselves under fire and putting their lives on the line. This is simply unnecessary.
Yeah, and we're hearing from people who went downtown to be a part of the peaceful process, and reporting back to us that they thought it was peaceful, that they for lack of a better word, enjoyed their time this evening, that if they took a sign for either side or whatever cause, that they would hand it off to other people as they left downtown Phoenix and headed back home tonight, and passed off their sign so that somebody else just heading in after work or after school or wherever they were coming from could take part and make their voices heard. We heard from so many people out there on all sides saying that this was their first time taking part in making their voices heard in the public arena like this, and they felt it was their call and their duty to do so. And now getting home and turning on the TV and seeing how things have changed out there, maybe most deeply disappointing to those who were able to take part in the peaceful part and then see it change into something like this hours later.
Yeah, it has often been said that democracy can be an ugly process, and there can be heated emotions on both sides, and when people are debating issues, and especially when it comes to issues of race and the divisions of race in this country. There is a long history of violence and violent confrontation between people and hatred on both sides. And, I had a woman on my Facebook page just comment simply, "I'm so tired of all of this."
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in this
Sure.
country are just so tired of all of the anger and the hatred. And if there's anything where there's fault on both sides, I think when it comes to anger and hatred,
Yep.
it is something that we can say there's fault on both sides here. People need to calm down, and people need to find their common ground. They need to find ways that they can come together rather than be driven apart. It has been said in the last decade or so that this country is as divided, or at least as divided as it's been since the Civil War. And it's hard to argue that when you see this happening on the streets of your hometown.
Absolutely. We're looking at here these live pictures of some of these larger trucks that had moved in to sort of keep the crowd from making its way down the street and also keep that crowd safe. Right there, the Herberger Theater in the background. Obviously a good sign that the trucks are leaving as well, because it's showing that they don't need to keep that area blocked anymore. We've got a lot coming up for you at 10, a complete recap of the day's events out there.
And we'll be back with ABC 15 News at 10 and a full recap in just a moment. After President Trump makes his mark with a nearly 90-minute speech.
And then the tone on the streets flipped. Anger and tension amped. Phoenix police vowing to keep the peace, holding their ground, working in and out of those crowds. But the tipping point, police telling ABC 15, was when rocks and bottles were launched at them.
We have team coverage for you tonight from the streets, as well as the takeaways from this big night.
First, ABC 15's Kim Tobin. She's live for us near 2nd Street in Monroe. And Kim, what's the temp of the crowd out there right now?
Seems a little bit calmer, you guys, because we were kind of right in the middle of it there. You were following along with us where they were deploying some of that tear gas, those little pops, some of that pepper spray that we got into our eyes, into our mouth and nose, and everyone was kind of coughing and making their way this way. So now we're watching. This is Van Buren and Central, and they've kind of drawn this line with some of these police bicycles.